Hey there, team, and welcome to episode 37 in the Physical Geology 101 video series. I'm Geology Professor Shawn Willsey. Thanks for joining me. This video series, Physical Geology, is modeled right after my college course. It's the same content, curriculum, information, knowledge that you'd get just as if you were sitting right there in my classroom. It's designed for those who have either taken a geology course in the past, either distant or maybe not so distant, those who've never had geology, people who want to review anything under the sun. This is just a basic course in physical geology to help you understand and learn more about this planet of ours. If you're enjoying this video series and some of my other videos, look under the video description, and there's some ways there if you want to support the channel and my educational outreach efforts. There's some options there for you. So let's go ahead and jump right into this episode. Today we're going to talk about groundwater issues, and we're also going to talk about caves as well, which is an interesting and fascinating feature that's created through with groundwater as the primary mechanism. So remember last time we looked at a lot of basics related to groundwater. We talked a little bit about recharge and discharge. Discharge being when water is leaving the system, recharge being when water is entering the groundwater system. And you can really start thinking about not just groundwater, but the entire water system is a bit of like a budget, right? Just like your checking account, you've got your withdrawals, you have your deposits, and then of course you have, whatever your balance is in that account. And so we often look at the groundwater system in the same way, thinking about a budget. All the water coming into the system could be precipitation, could be snow melt, could be artificial recharge if we're actually manipulating the system and adding water to our groundwater system. And then all the water leaving the system, that could be natural points like springs, could also be artificial points like wells and other things that remove water from the system. And so there's a simple equation here, just like, again, back to your checking account, that we use to evaluate the groundwater budget. Basically, the water coming in, if you take all that water as a volume, I suppose, and look at all the water coming in and subtract the amount of water leaving the system, that gives us our change in storage. And so we can, again, look at this just like a checking account or a bank account. And this is the way groundwater managers manage the system, is thinking about sources of inflow, outflow, and this is always changing. So some of these parameters are changing. Some of them have longer transient times. Some of them have shorter transient times. But it is a management tool that's often used for groundwater. We can consider groundwater to be a resource that can actually be mined. So just like we mine oil and gas, we mine coal, gold, other resources from the ground, groundwater can actually be mined in the sense that if you're taking it out quicker than it can be replenished, you're essentially mining that resource. And of course, that's not sustainable over long term. So again, I'm not trying to make any deep statements here one way or another, but these are just some of the implications of overusing groundwater. So we're going to look at a few issues that arise and are quite common in today's world when it comes to overusing groundwater. So the first one here is subsidence. Basically, when we take water out of the ground, especially if that water is stored in a sedimentary aquifer, basically a geologic unit that is composed of grains of sand or gravel, basically sedimentary particles. That water, as you can see in the graphic here, occupies space between the grains and actually it takes some of the volume out of the ground. And when we actually deplete the water, so when that water is sucked out of the ground, those grains get compacted, they settle, the space and the porosity decreases, and that actually causes the ground to sink. Again, a feature or process we call subsidence. And so subsidence or subsidence is very not just common in at least parts of the western United States. It's actually kind of a big problem. It comes with it a whole host of related problems as well. So this is fundamentally one of the problems with overusing, especially in shallow groundwater systems in sedimentary basins, in overusing the water, and it can cause the ground to actually sink a little bit. And so these are some graphics here that just really nicely illustrate this. Let's start with the one on the left here. You can see a pole here. This was taken, way back in 1977. We have a gentleman standing here on the ground, and if you can't read the side, and it says San Joaquin Valley, California. So this is the Central Valley of California, and it says subsidence 1925 to 1977. So if you look way up at the top of the pole, maybe 30 feet up the pole, what we see there is the elevation of the ground as it was in 1925. By 1955, 30 years later, the ground in this valley, the land surface, had subsided or sank to the elevation shown here. And then by 1977, where the gentleman's standing there, you can see how much the ground had subsided. And this is all due to, again, in this incredibly productive agriculture region, over pumping of the groundwater system, causing the sediments in the ground to settle, compact, reducing their porosity, and causing the land surface to sink as well. So a big problem there. And then we even have some more modern images I've thrown in here, just so we don't think that this is something that happened way back in the day. So here's the same valley, the San Joaquin Valley of California. And here's another graphic with elevation from 1988 to 2016. And you can see here on the sign about 6.2 feet, about 2 meters of elevation drop of the entire valley over that period of time due to groundwater withdrawal and subsidence. And then here, just to show you a different area, lest we think this is just a California issue, this is an area in Arizona, and you can see 1952 up there on the pole there, down to 1977, down to 1985. So again, about 15.4 feet, or about 5 meters or so of subsidence or subsidence that's taken place there due to groundwater withdrawal. The other thing we sometimes see are these fissures or cracks that can open up in the ground as the land sinks or subsides. Picture there from southern Utah in the Utah Geologic Survey. So subsidence is a big problem with overpumping groundwater. Another thing that can arise, especially in coastal areas, is something known as saltwater intrusion. So the idea here is that in a coastal setting, we have the ocean, we have the land, we have ocean water or seawater that seeps down into the sediments below the ocean, forming a salty groundwater body. And then on the land, of course, we have a freshwater or a freshwater aquifer system here. And there's a natural boundary that exists between those two because their densities are quite a bit different. And when we have a pump placed on land, so if we put in a well and pump that water, if we're not careful, we can quickly draw in that salt water into this freshwater well and create some problems that way. And I'm not sure the details in terms of, like, you know, how easy this is to remediate or fix, but it is of concern and it is a serious problem in coastal areas, this idea of saltwater intrusion. Other places what we see is groundwater reversal, or the contamination can be a problem. So in this case here, we have a home with a septic tank, and we have the well for the home. This is the clean drinking water well here. But if we have a well, in this case with the bottom diagram, if a well is placed that pumps too hard and heavily, as it creates that cone of depression, as it draws down the water table, it can actually reverse the flow of the water. Notice here in the top diagram, the groundwater, the regional groundwater flow direction is to the left. So the effluent from the septic tank is carried away from the well. But in the bottom diagram with this large well with a heavy pumping rate, actually reverses the flow of the septic tank, and that effluent now is carried towards the resident's drinking water well, which can create some problems as well. Now you've got a contamination issue. Again, these are mostly solvable problems, but they may not be easily solved, and they may not be solved without substantial amounts of funding and dollars to help with the whole problem. Okay, so let's look now at caves. Let's look at one of the main features that forms from some of these groundwater processes. So when it rains, when we get rainwater falling out of the atmosphere, that's water, right? H2O. But as it passes through the atmosphere, that water actually picks up a little bit of CO2, a little bit of the carbon dioxide that's in the atmosphere. And what we get then chemically, and what falls on the ground and hits your umbrella and actually hits the surface of the earth, is actually a weak acid, a carbonic acid. Now, this is not the same as like acid rain, which has a much lower pH and much more acidic type solution. But the point is that the water that hits the surface is slightly acidic. And we know that with things that are even just a little bit acidic, that we have certain minerals like calcite, which is a dominant mineral in rocks like limestone. And these slightly acidic solutions then that can dissolve the calcite in the limestone. And over time, basically what we're doing is dissolving out the rock, the calcite in the rock, and we can create caverns or caves. And so basically this process playing out over long periods of time, you can actually build or establish these cave systems in the subsurface below the ground and below the water table. And that can create cave systems, which are places we go explore, part of the national park system. But if you have a large cave that's dissolved out some limestone or calcite beneath a property or in a more urban environment, that can create sinkholes, which can be a big hazard, and both financially and potentially to human lives as well. So groundwater erosion sort of giveth and it taketh away. It gives us spectacular caves and amazing scenery in an underground environment, but it also can create these hazards at the surface. If the cave roof is too thin, especially if the water table is dropping due to overpumping, that can leave this hollow space beneath the property or beneath the home, and that can cause these sinkholes to form. Let's look at how caves actually form. It's actually an interesting process. And so here we have an area underlain by limestone, again, a rock that is made out of calcite, and calcite, of course, can be dissolved by water, rainwater, and water percolating down through the subsurface. And so we have the water starting to work its way down through the limestone, and it's starting to dissolve it. So this always takes place below the water table. So everything below the water table is an area where we're actively creating more space in the rock because we're dissolving away rock due to this slightly acidic solution, the groundwater moving through the cave system. Notice over here we have a river and the surface water, which is a surface reflection of the water table. If we go to the next stage in the diagram here, stage 2, we've substantially created larger cave systems below the water table. So the cave network is expanding both along bedding planes, so horizontally in this case here, but also along maybe some vertical fractures that were already pre-existing that the groundwater can exploit. So that's our second one here. But eventually in this landscape, if the river continues to cut deeper and maybe make a deeper canyon, as we see over here with number 3, that's going to cause the groundwater system to track with it. So notice the water table over here is pretty much on par with the surface of the river over here on the right. And so now we have these hollow sections of the cave up above where the water table, the groundwater no longer resides. And now we're starting to create even more expansive networks of caves at depth below the water table. So these hollowed out caves just filled with air, shown in black here, those would be the types of caves we would readily explore. Those would be the caves that you might see at your national park or national monument. But the cave's actually not getting any bigger in those locations. It's expanding only in these places that are below the water table down here where dissolution of that limestone continues. And then in our final diagram here, we can see that the canyon's cut even deeper. The water table's dropped even further than it was previously. Get out of the way a little bit. And now you can see that the main thing happening in those abandoned caves closer to the surface is water still seeping down, carrying dissolved mineral material, but it's actually starting to fill in the cave. It's actually starting to deposit mineral material in those cave systems. And simultaneously at depth, where we have the area below the water table, that's where the cave systems are getting larger and more expansive. So notice that the caves track with the surface water bodies as this landscape develops. When the surface water bodies are high, the water table's high, and that's where the caves are getting larger. But as the water in the stream goes lower, as the canyons are cut deeper, then the water table tracks with that, and you end up with these very extensive cave systems, sort of vertically as well as laterally. So that's the idea behind cave formations. Let's look a little bit at some of these depositional features. So the first thing that happens after these hollowed out cave systems are formed is groundwater continues to seep down, preferentially along fractures and other easy conduits that the water can follow. But as it moves down through the rock, it's dissolving out some of the calcite out of the limestone. Once it starts dripping off the ceiling of the cave, it actually precipitates some mineral material behind, and it forms initially these things called soda straws. So these are these cylindrical tubes. They're actually hollow on the inside, so water's traveling down the inside of the tube, and then drop by drop by drop, these things get longer, but they can eventually get plugged up. So they're also precipitating mineral material inside the tube, or inside the straw, if you will. Once they get plugged up, the water starts running along the outside of the feature here, and that's when it sort of evolves from a soda straw into a stalactite, these sort of icicle shaped features that protrude down from the ceiling of the cave. You can see how nicely these follow this fracture system here. So we have a preferential pathway that the groundwater is following as it works its way down through this limestone, through this rock. And then of course the classic cave features. So the pointy ones are, and skinny ones are the stalactites. Those drops do hit the floor of the cave, where they can also build up mineral material to form these more rounded cave features here called stalagmites. And then in some instances, you can even get the stalagmites growing upwards while the stalactites are growing downwards, and they can actually link together to form columns. So these are other cave features we often see. Here's a nice skinny one over here. Here's a nice thick one over in this region of the cave. But fascinating features nonetheless. And then finally, to wrap up this episode, here in extensive areas where we have a lot of the limestone, and the groundwater and surface water are actively eroding or dissolving out that limestone, we actually get an interesting set of topographic features that are it's sometimes collectively called karst topography. So any environment where you have a lot of limestone and you have sufficient rain for the water to be actively dissolving away rock, you might get this type of topographic setting. You might get not just caves in the subsurface, you might get things like what we see here, like disappearing streams, like streams that actually go into cave systems or reappear in some other place downstream. Just an interesting set of features on that landscape. You might get very irregular drainage systems where it's not draining like you typically would see small streams draining into larger streams. You might see stream systems very disrupted, disappearing, and then reappearing. So a very intricate and complex way in which the subsurface and the groundwater interacts and is set up in an interesting array with the surface water streams that we find up above. So that'll do it for this episode 37, just looking at a few groundwater issues and then looking at caves, which are a really interesting and common feature related to groundwater in certain environments like limestone. So I hope you enjoyed this episode, and we'll see you next time. Take care.